This program from HOA Simplified, Healthy Reserves, Healthy Community, is a interesting one and an important one. And I want to make sure I'm speaking directly to you as board members, representatives of your community. So I felt like my role here to come alongside HOA Simplified is to talk about reserve study basics, so that how that feeds into being a healthy community and understanding what healthy reserves actually are. So let me go on the program here. So it all starts out with a challenge. There's always a problem to solve. And living in community, it starts out with some things belong to the association, some things belong to individual owners. And so that creates a little bit of tension. The board's responsible for the things that are common area, and the individual owners take care of their own private space. And so that you have to appreciate that everything, the private space and the common areas, are subject to deterioration. Now, deterioration is expensive. Key here is it's predictable and it's ongoing. So you have to appreciate and remember that Mother Nature and Father Time are to blame, and they don't negotiate. They're an eons-based factor. It's just part of life on this planet. So the question is, what do we do? We've got association responsible for this stuff. Me, myself, as an owner, I'm responsible for this stuff, and they're all deteriorating as a board member. What do we do? And so that's why I've joined the program here today. I represent Association Reserves. We founded this a long time ago. It seems like a long time. I believe it is a long time ago, 39 years. Last month, we completed our 100,000th reserve study, and we've learned a thing or two along the way. So let me share some of these things that we've learned that I can help you have a healthy community by having healthy reserves. All right. So it's important to appreciate that deterioration defines the cost. It's not you, the board, saying we need to replace the roof. The cost is always driven by Mother Nature and Father Time. So Mother Nature and Father Time define the deterioration of the roof, the asphalt, the paint, the carpet, all your common areas. It's just up to the board. Their only responsibility is to set the budget that keeps up. And so many people think of it as when the cost actually happens. You can see the cartoon here, an elderly gentleman complaining, why should I contribute to reserves at my age? I don't even care enough about the future to buy green bananas. So that's a big why, a real big pushback. And I illustrate it this way. People think of reserves like it's a boiler project or a roof project or an asphalt or a siding project, discrete expenses. And in reality, reserve expenses are more like this. Remember, they're driven by Mother Nature and Father Time. Day after day after day, the cycles of sun coming up, going down, hot, cool, rain, winter, whatever we're subject to, the actual expenses are more like sand in an hourglass. And so on a graph, you're going to see the expenses occurring over the years. And with inflation, they're going to gradually get more expensive over the years. So this is what you're trying to offset at your association, not those discrete expenses. And so when you view reserves this way, you start to appreciate that you have a choice. Now, you have a choice to be subject to those singular expenses, the boiler, the roof, the asphalt, those things, or you can take care of it with budgeted funding, because indeed, as the deterioration is a daily event, you can budget and have the funding be a daily, weekly, monthly event. And so your choice is, are you going to sit back, close your eyes, cover your ears, sit in silence, and wait till a special assessment hits, or are you going to budget for the cost? And remember, I said reserve expenses are eminently predictable. So we really believe here that there's no reason to surprise your owners with special assessments for expenses that are not surprising. These roofing and painting and asphalt and boilers and chillers and light fixtures and everything else, lobby renovations, nothing about that is surprising. So your challenge is to care for the association and nurture it forward. We've got the board members here. We've got the managers in the middle. We've got the owners here. It's a package. This is a community that you're trying to take care of. So what we have is multi-million dollar nonprofit entities, these associations. They're run by an untrained volunteer board of directors. The asterisk on that is assisted by the management company. And you think, well, what could possibly go wrong? Well, because it's untrained volunteer board of directors that really do have all the power, quite often we see them running themselves out of money. And the net effect of that was most clearly shown in June of 2021 when Champlain Tower South collapsed, taking 98 people's lives with it. They were just band-aiding, I've heard people say, baling wire and duct tape and baling wire. They were doing the minimum to that association, and it showed, and it coupled with maybe a marginal design and marginal construction, half the building fell. So that's the challenge. And let me move on to talk about your association. We understand that every association's budget is tight. We just stipulate that. It's just the way it is. And you understand that you have bills that you need to pay. Now, what's interesting is that most associations do a good job of paying the operating budget bills, the utilities, the insurance bill, um, the management company, especially. Simon, I get a smile out of that. There we go. But most associations do a good job of paying the monthly bills, but they do a lousy job of paying these reserve bills. Now, just because the roof doesn't send a monthly deterioration bill, remember it's deteriorating every month, that cost of deterioration really is as real as any other bill. If the current owners don't pay for it, the future owners will. It's like if you don't pay the power bill, it doesn't go away. It just stacks up. And presuming they don't turn your electricity off, you just have to pay the catch up. You'll pay 3 months worth of that bill in 3 months. That cost doesn't go away. So this reserve study concept, it reveals your ongoing cost of deterioration because the roof, the paint, the asphalt, the boiler, the lobby don't send you a monthly bill. It's a bill just like any other that you pay. And what happens if you don't? Well, you get ironwork that looks like this, a pool restroom that looks like this, or a tennis court that looks like this. You just let them go and, oh, we don't have the money, we didn't budget for it, and bad things start to happen. And another consequence is you can think of it as a real estate agent talking about the association, showing the association to some prospective buyers, and what are they going to say? Wow, this it's affordable. It's kind of rustic architecture, and as you can see, they aren't wasting HOA dues on taking care of this place, funding the reserves. And so this says a lot in this little picture here that the trying to keep funding low, underfunding reserves does really cost you in home values. And home values are the brass ring. They're the prize. And I want to encourage you to believe, and we've done the research behind it, that reserve funding is one of the best investments you can make in real estate. It's a very strong payback. We want your association to be looking like this. And that's where you're going to have maximized home values. The home value increase is significantly larger than the amount of money you set aside in reserves. Okay, now let's talk about reserve studies themselves. What are they? How they fit in? What kind of terminology do you need to know? And first off, I'm going to speak in some real small numbers. No reason for a calculator. There's three types of reserve studies. There's a full reserve study, there's an update with site visit, and an update no site visit. What are the differences? Well, the full is a create from scratch where we measure things, we quantify things. You have this much square feet of roofing, this many square yards of carpet. You have two elevators, they're three-stop elevators, whatever they are. We're quantifying all that kind of stuff. And you really only need to do that once, a full reserve study. And then there's this concept of the updates to that. And you need to do updates because every year the cash balance in reserves changes. The cost of your reserve projects changes, and the condition of your reserve assets change. Every year they're changing, no doubt about that. And every 3 years is the recommended national best practices, and it happens to be the national, or excuse me, the California requirement for doing a with site visit update. And a no site visit is highly recommended in the in-between years, again, because everything is changing. And the update no site visits are very inexpensive. There are four reserve rules. As you think about it, this is the way we like board members to think about it, that expenses are inevitable, again, driven by Mother Nature and Father Time. As you know, the board's responsible for caring for the assets of the association, speaking on behalf of the group of homeowners. They're the fiduciary. They're the ones that have legal responsibility for the association. Delays usually get expensive. When you wait, then you get scope creep, and all of a sudden, a simple painting project goes from painting to painting and carpentry because you have underlying wood damage. That's just a very simple example, but delays usually get expensive and homeowners always get stuck paying the bills. So if you truly want to keep the um, cost down for homeowners, you will do projects on time. And the way you have money to do the projects on time is to have the money ready and just offset your ongoing deterioration with reserve funding. Now, I will touch on the law a little bit throughout this, but I want to encourage you to think that legislative compliance is really not the point. If you are in okay, let's think about Lake Tahoe. There's a California side of Lake Tahoe and there's a Nevada side of Lake Tahoe, right? If there's an association right at the south end of Lake Tahoe, it really doesn't care if it's covered under California laws or Nevada laws on reserve studies, which are different. The point is that all your assets are deteriorating, and you, the board, are responsible to manage that on behalf of the homeowners. And the choice you make is going to mean, do we have enough cash to do these projects in a timely manner? Or are we going to run into surprise special assessments, again, for things that weren't surprising, and have emergencies? And that's just no way to live. So it's just a part of being humans and having buildings on this planet Earth. Okay, well, let's talk about some reality. What are we reserving for? Question is, how do you know if you have enough? Do you feel good about your 50,000 or 150,000 or $500,000? Do we have enough? And the question is, where do we go from here? As we're recording this, it's in December. December 2025, and you're wondering, I trust, do we have enough money and how much should we be budgeting for 2026? Really the fundamental questions about reserve studies. So let me tell you how we answer those. First off, there are three results in the reserve study, and they match those three questions. The component list tells you what are we funding for? Reserve fund strength is a calculation that measures how well prepared you are. And the funding plan is the recommendation for where you go from here. So let me walk you through that real quickly. The component list you see, if you've ever seen a reserve study, you've seen a table like this with description of the components, the useful life, remaining useful life, and replacement costs. And notice that you may have multiple projects for the same physical component. Like for asphalt, you may be sealing it every 5 years, and then you may be resurfacing it every 20 years. So we're talking about projects here, not things. Or the projects that need to happen at your association. And we're guided by National Reserve Study Standards that has a three-part test. And if something passes all elements of the three-part test, it should be in your reserve study. Number one, it needs to be the association's obligation, not the management company, not private property. If you've got patio furniture on your balcony, the question is it yours or did you borrow it from the pool? Okay, if you borrowed it from the pool, number one, put it back, but the association is responsible to replace that. If it's your stuff, it's not the association's responsibility. So that's test number one. Test number two is it needs to be reasonably anticipated. We're not talking about guesses here. We're not talking about acts of God. We're talking about, as I've said, the normal progression of daily deterioration. And it needs to be a significant enough cost that it would be disruptive to the operating budget. If it's a minor maintenance object project, do it from your miscellaneous fund from operating, add it to maintenance. So if it's significant, it should go on reserve. So those three tests are what tells you if it should be funded through reserves. And what this means are that reserves are for major projects that we can anticipate with reasonable certainty that are the association's obligation to repair or replace. So there's no trivia and there's no guessing. And keep coming back to this, prevents you from being surprised by things that are not or should not be surprising. Okay, turn the page. Let's talk about the reserve fund strength. You can imagine that there's a balance between, let's say, a new association. It's in great condition. We'll hold that high. And over the years, the roof deteriorates, the siding deteriorates, the asphalt deteriorates. And you can argue that the value of that has deteriorated. Well, that has a numeric value. And so you want to increase the amount of cash you have in reserves to offset the deterioration. And there's a balance. Just like in a store, the products on the shelves leave the store and customers provide cash at the cash register to replace that stuff. And that's the balance the store has. And that's the balance we're going to be talking about here. The value of deterioration and the value, literally, the cash that you have on hand. And that comparison is called percent funded. And it's much more insightful than knowing the amount of cash you have. I never met Simon personally. I don't know if he's taller than me, shorter than me, heavier or slenderer. So if I have a dress jacket, it may be a fantastic dress jacket, but it may not fit him. So we're talking about, do you have the amount of cash that fits the needs of your association? So let me tell you what that means. When we make this comparison, the amount of cash, again, it's called percent funded, compared to your reserve needs, when you're close to the 100% range, it means you have very low risk of special assessment. It means you have the cash on hand that you need to be able to make things happen. Special assessments are rare when an association's reserves are 70% higher or more. It begins to be fair risk of special assessment when you drop below the 70% level, and about a 50% risk of special assessment when your reserves are below 30%. It's like any other major health risk. When you're extremely overweight, when your blood pressure is bad, when your cholesterol is bad. This is one of those indicators for an association that tells you, based on this number, your probability of having a bad thing happen, specifically a special assessment, is high or low. So high risk of special assessment in 0 to 30% funded, low risk of special assessment above 70% funded. And that's because you have the cash there to do what you need to do. So that tells you where you are. So I want you all going to your reserve study and seeing what your percent funded is. And that, not the amount of cash in the bank, is what tells you, do you feel good about the amount of cash that you have in your reserve fund at this time? Okay, let's turn on to the funding plan. What do we do based on how many assets we have at our association and our starting point? The illustration here is, if let's talk about driving a car and you need to get on the freeway on-ramp and merge, okay? If it's a short freeway on-ramp, you really got to step on the gas to get to merging speed to 60, or here in California, 70 miles an hour. And so how fast you need to go to catch up to where you need to be. And that usually seems like a heck of a lot of money, wheelbarrows full of money. And I'm going to tell you that it really is expensive. For the average association, reserve funding needs to be somewhere in the 15 to 40% portion of your total budget. So a good figure of merit for the purpose of today is a great free tidbit. Let's say that if you don't know, I'll say Start at funding reserves at 25% of total budget. If your monthly assessments are $400 a month, one quarter is 100. You should be setting aside $100 of your 400 towards reserves. It's that kind of significant to your association. And what's that mean? Well, it'll provide enough cash flow that you have the right amount of money at the right time to get all your projects done. Smooth sailing, no special assessments. But again, we live on this planet called Earth, and nothing happens exactly according to plan. You need to have some margin. So your reserve state provider will recommend a little bit more than the bare minimum in order to deal with the uncertainties of life. When you have a roof that fails a little bit early, or painting that the paint just wasn't good and you're going to need to paint in 5 years instead of 7 years, things like that, just the uncertainties of life. Or you realize you have a great association, but the dumpster, or excuse me, the garbage waste pickup goes around the back side of the association like it did at my condo many years ago. And when it turns that tight corner, it eats up the asphalt. And it did that 2 cycles until we said, this is silly. And we pulled out the asphalt and put in concrete at that corner. Okay. There's these silly things that are going to happen at your association. You need to be prepared to have more than just the bare minimum of cash on hand. So, in conclusion to my prepared remarks, this is what Mother Nature and Father Time are going to do to your association. Now, I specifically like this picture because you get the idea of what happens to this barn of a building when you don't paint it, when you don't replace the roof. The animals, I don't know if these are beehives or just storage boxes, but it's trash. It's lousy. Look closely in the bottom left corner, you'll see a brand new townhome association coming up on the street right next to it. If those people in that townhome association don't care for their property, in 40 or 50 or 60 years, it's going to look like this barn, right? You have to appreciate the inevitability of the powers of Mother Nature and Father Time. And they're going to do things like this to your asphalt. You just know that. They're going to do things like this to your stairways. This was a stairway at a client property. Fortunately, there's 2 stairways, one at each end of the building. It's a 2-story walk-up, no elevator here. And they had to put caution tape on the north stairway because they hadn't painted it. They hadn't done anything other than they replaced, you can see a couple of the stair treads, but otherwise they're doing the bare minimum. And they're recommending everyone make the long walk to the south stairs. These things happen. So I want to remind you that from what we see touching all these associations all the way across the country, we have 18 offices across the country. The cost of reserve deterioration is very predictable. You see it when you buy a car. You see it when you buy a major appliance. There's estimates saying that if you're going to drive this car, this big car, Pathfinder Armada, it's going to burn a lot of gas. You know that. If you have 6 kids, you got to buy a Pathfinder. You should not be buying a Mazda Miata. You should not be buying maybe a tiny, um, what was that first? I'm losing my words right now. The first hybrid car, Toyota Prius, unless it's dad or mom's car for commuting to the office. You know what you need, and your association has needs. So you want to be budgeting for the needs of your association. Now, you all are in leadership. What can you do? What should you do? So communication is powerful. You aligned with your management company, be careful in your words. Appreciate that owning real estate is expensive. And don't talk about setting aside for the future. Remember, you got to think the hourglass concept. You're not setting aside for the future. You're not paying the bills. You're not setting aside for, excuse me, you're not setting aside for a rainy day. You're not setting aside for emergencies that, are someone else's problem. You are paying the cost of ongoing deterioration. 20-year roof life divided by 20 years, you want to just pay 1/20th of the cost of that roof deterioration this year. That's all you're doing. That's fair. And use your words carefully. You are budgeting for the funding needs of the association, not contributions. Contributions sound voluntary. I think we've done our disservice to the community association industry in calling them reserve contributions. It makes them sound like you may or may not want to do it. It's up to you. Well, it's not up to you. Reserve funding is as a bill as real as any other bill at your association. The roof is deteriorating. Or you could say it by now. The paint is deteriorating. The asphalt is deteriorating. Every day, a little bit more. And you can put a dollar amount on that. So every month, you should be setting aside, offsetting that ongoing cost of deterioration. This is at a property in Los Angeles that I enjoyed. I liked going from the parking garage on my left hand off the flying bridge to the association on the right. There was tennis courts paralleling the two-story parking deck, and I love this sign. We want the structure to be perfect. Please let us know about anything that isn't right, and have a maintenance hotline. So you can call and say, "Hey, I found this parking stop was broken in half. Can you fix it?" This is a place that is prioritizing taking good care of the property, not minimizing the homeowner assessments. They realize that they're going to be making tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's a premium association. That's where you make your money. So the action steps: set a budget to offset the ongoing cost of deterioration, collect those funds, and pay those bills. Okay? Collect the funds, transfer them to reserves. It's an ongoing process you do every year. And in doing so, you minimize special assessments. There will be surprises. There's a lightning strike that lights a fire that burns down building 3. You're going to have a deductible. That may be an opportunity for a special assessment. But by golly, don't get a special assessment for a roof that deteriorated in plain sight, on schedule, over 20 years. That's silly. You could also, an attorney might say that's reckless. So minimize deferred maintenance. That's going to save you money. By doing so, you minimize costs to your homeowners. You maximize owner enjoyment when the place looks nice. The swings work. The tot lot is attractive. The lobby is attractive. You can use the tennis court. It's not like that deteriorated mess I showed earlier. And you maximize property values. People are happy when their equity is going up in their home. Now, if you're not there, you have to appreciate that if you're not there, you probably got to this deteriorated state over a series of years or decades. And it may take a few years to get back to that idea of having an improved future. But it's worth the journey. And in summation, a reserve study guides you there. This is us, Association Reserves, reservestudy.com. I went through this material relatively quickly today. We have plenty of free articles on our website. Videos are both on our website and on our YouTube channel. You can look up for reserve studies, reserve funding, and you'll probably find our stuff there. We have a weekly podcast for board members to encourage and equip board members for the hard work you do um, leading your community into the future. That's hoainsights.org or on any major podcast platform. And Simon, that brings me to the end of my prepared comments. I had a few common FAQs that people ask. We can go down these, or let's actually start with what people may have asked in their Q&A.
Sounds great. Well, first of all, Robert, thank you so much for the great presentation. I really love that you gave a lot of great examples. Like the freeway was was a good one for me as a California resident. That was pretty funny. Overall, thank you so much for the presentation. Yeah, I know that you have some general questions, but we can obviously get started with some of the questions that our board members asked.
Okay.
Um, so one of our board members asked, so how do you update the average life expectations for certain mechanical improvements in the common area based on new experience or changing technology? Is that done at the time of the required on site inspection. He's specifically asking for such as grinders, sewer grinders.
Good point. Okay, you have, again, I said the cost, the condition, and the cash in reserves changes every year. So 84% of our clients update the reserve study annually. It's like you said, it's a quarter of their budget, and they want to make sure they're on track. So whether in the no site visit update or the with site visit update, we are updating that type of information so the association is prepared. Um, we get that information based on visual characteristics when it comes to an elevator, HVAC system, a big boiler, or a part of a wastewater treatment center. We typically get on the phone or are corresponding. Last one I did was a dam in North Carolina. Geez Louise, I don't know about a dam in North Carolina. So I spoke to their lake management company, and we talked about what needs to be done for the dam, the spillway, all those kinds of things. And we broke it down and we speak to the association's expert and we break down the expectations for the future based on its current condition. And so we do that all in the process of the reserve site being updated. It's not numbers we pull out our head. We can observe how your painting is doing. But for a complicated mechanical system, we typically call or correspond with your service provider.
Awesome. And the second question, Robert, is this is a pretty good one. What I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have the name, but this board member asked, what do you do about some homeowners who say they cannot, I think, they cannot afford increased dues?
Yeah, good question. You have to appreciate that you are, as a board member, responsible for the association. You're not responsible for individual owners. It hit me the most when I was I was president. What got me into this whole mess 39 years ago. I was president for 2 years of my condominium association in Southern California. And I had a homeowner who said, Robert, I know you're setting the budget, but there's people like me that can't afford it. So you got to keep the dues low. And we did the best we could to keep the dues similar to the prior year. And then I noticed in another month or two that that person was driving a new car. And I realized that people are responsible for managing their money. I was responsible for managing the association's money. And my job as a board member is to provide the association with the money it needs. Period. End of subject. I'm out of my lane when I'm presuming what an owner might be able to afford for their cable bill, cell phone bill, transportation, that kind of stuff. If Mrs. Jones in unit number 13 can't afford to live in your association, that's unfortunate. She will have to find less expensive housing. You have a responsibility to the members of the association to sustain the assets of the corporation. So you have to set that aside. You want to be kind, you want to be neighborly, but you have a job to provide a sustainable budget for the assets of the association. You have to be balance fairness to the association with your love for your neighbor.
Yeah, that's great. Just to kind of double click on that, I think, some people think that, I was talking to this one board member and they are thinking that having high HOA dues is not good for the community and, lower dues is good and like it will actually provide the good for the home value. So what are what is your take on that, Robert?
Well, the community association industry is probably in the fourth decade now, 40 plus years. And so we're finding more and more savvy homeowners who are looking at the association's percent funded because they want to see what the risk is of a special assessment. I gave that hypothetical a moment ago about if your homeowner assessments are $400 per month. Well, with no reserve funding. So with reserve funding, it'd be 525 or so, which is better, $400 or 525 with reserve funding. Well, for a prospective buyer, They look at the $400 a month and they say, that's attractive, but you're 12% funded and I'm going to get hit with a $12,000 special assessment. I'm not happy. I'm not buying this place, not without a significant discount in the sales price. So that $500,000 home, they're going to say, no, I'll offer 450. And you just blew 50 grand for, 100 and some dollars a month. So we're talking about more savvy board members, excuse me, prospective buyers. And we are also on the verge of seeing insurance companies and the mortgage powers, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the major lenders, wanting to look at reserves because they know that if you or I are applying for a mortgage and we're mortgaged up to here, they're not going to approve that mortgage for me if there's a chance of getting special assessed. That might throw me into default. So they're looking, we're on the verge, I would say, and from what I've known, from what I've seen, the trends I've seen, the insurance companies and the mortgage companies are going to make it very difficult to live if your reserves are weak. That's just the way this is going.
For sure. And I
And
guess
and
just, yeah,
if you feel your monthly assessments are higher than the average association in your neighborhood, boast about that. We have higher assessments and we're proud of it because we don't have special assessments here. That's what it's going to be. And by the way, we take care of things on time. We're going to enjoy living here. Shout it from the rooftop.
that's awesome. I think, talking about special assessments, Robert, actually, and obviously some might argue that special assessments are more, if quote unquote, efficient because owners keep their own money until the project is needed. For example, like board members may say, like I'm not going to put in my reserves until it's absolutely necessary. So what is your view on this topic on like just keep having special assessments versus having adequate reserves?
Yeah. Well, there's different ways to answer that, and I'll touch on three. One is that your governing documents say the board shall or the board must set aside funds for the care of the property. So fundamentally, you're in breach of your governing documents if you aren't funding reserves. That's, I'm not the attorney, so I'm not going to stand on that. I'm the reserve study guy, but you have to appreciate the significance of not doing what your governing documents say. Number two, special assessments are uncertain. You may pass them, you may not pass them. And you then get into a sticky wicket because you, as a board member, are responsible for caring for the assets of the association, and the homeowners aren't. If I ask you, hey, Simon, you want to go to dinner with me? And you say, yeah. And I say, we're going to go to Spago and, expensive restaurant. And you say, wasn't really thinking about, a $200, $300 dinner. How about we think of something else? It may be uncertain. We may have to shift down to something else. We had one client that had balconies,
Mhm.
and the balconies had dry rot in them. And they'd found that in two of the 42 or 43 balconies. They expected all the other ones were going to need the same kind of repair work. They called for a special assessment, it failed. They called for another special assessment, it failed. Then they started moving all the debris from the um, dry rotted balconies and they put it right by the entry guard shack. So everyone saw that deteriorated balcony debris every day when they came in and came out. And they realized, oh, gee, that's going to be my balcony pretty soon, too. Special assessment passed on the third time because they did that. So special assessments are um, uncertain. Number three, it is a more expensive way to handle um, projects at an association. When you are putting your money in the hands of the association, you're getting compounding interest, and compounding interest is magic. Now, you may or may not be investing your money. The majority of people who say, I'd rather hold on to my money, they aren't investing it. They're just spending it on life. The average homeowner works paycheck to paycheck. They don't have a magic fund on the side that they're making 7 to 14% on. It's just a nice phrase that they say, I'd rather hold on to my money. Well, I'd like to hold on to my money. You'd like to hold on to your money. Um, but again, it just means that that $100,000 special assessment could have been handled with $88,000 worth of reserve funding over the course of 15 years. And that's just never good to have to ask more money from your homeowners than is fair. And then those people who are homeowners at the time of that special assessment, so this is number four, it's unfair. They pay the entire burden of all that deterioration that led up to that point. And that's unfair.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's especially insightful when homeowners typically argue, I don't want to hire dues, I don't want to pay reserves, I just want special assessment because, who doesn't like to keep money to themselves? So,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's
you have to ask who's in charge here, and it's the board. And the board has a responsibility. If I ask you, would you rather have your homeowner assessments 400 or 525? You would say, I'd rather have them 400. But I'm not asking you. I have a job as the board president and the treasurer and the other members of the board. We have a job to provide for the sustainability of the association. So it's really not a question.
awesome. It seems like no one else has any other questions.
Do you want to go to mine,
Did
or do you
did you
want?
have like a frequently asked questions on the
Yeah,
last slide? Maybe it could be helpful too
yeah. I'll let you pick.
as well.
So here we go.
It's like a candy shop. Uh, I actually think the first question is very interesting. How do we know what's going to happen 20 or 30 years in the future? And I mean, obviously, Feds are cutting rates and there's inflation going on. So we would love your take on kind of, I guess, your magic ball into the future.
Yeah. Hey, for HOA Simplified, I'm going to show everyone my secret. I bought a crystal ball on Amazon. That's the secret. No, I enjoy having that because it's just makes a joke out of it. But we don't know what's going on 20 or 30 years into the future. We know what trends have been to this point now. We know what a new roof looks like or a bad roof looks like. So we know what the conditions are now. We know how much it costs to do this project. And we have the expectation that we're going to be updating the reserve study every third year at most, at least frequent, at least every third year, if not more frequently. And so, as the certain projects, we can see the patio furniture at the pool. Oh, that looks lousy. We know that. And so we give that a remaining useful life of 0. And the elevator, it's doing its job just fine. We're going to have to call the elevator company and find out what its service reports have been like, all that kind of stuff. And the elevator consultant, your elevator service company may say, oh, it's probably in the 10 or 15 years away range because it's 15 years old now. And we say, thank you very much. And we put it at 10 or 15 years into the future. And then we keep updating that. And eventually, you will get to a point managing that property where you say, Robert, ABC Villas, they're spending a whole lot of money on elevator repairs. They are, at this point in time, in need of modernization. And we say, fine. We've been watching that project gradually get closer and closer over the years. So we're not magically making guesses about something far into the future. We know what's happening in the near term. We have a fuzzy idea of the midterm, and we have a little bit of a grasp out further. And we make the best estimates possible, but we're continually updating that. So everything that's fuzzy is gradually drawing into focus. But we're well enough prepared that we're just doing minor budget adjustments along the way.
For sure. I mean, I think that's really insightful, especially, obviously we're all predicting at the same time, but it's really important for us to be active in kind of the concept of the hourglass. I really love the concept of hourglass where we are kind of constantly funding the reserves. I think the next question, Robert, we can go into because we only focus on California HOAs. What does California law require in terms of reserve study?
Sure. California Civil Code, sometimes we call it the Davis-Sterling Act, requires a with site visit reserve study at least every third year. And interestingly, in California, it also requires an annual reserves, operating reserves funding disclosure, ARFSDA, something like that. Um, and the way you get information for that annual disclosure is you need a updated reserve study. You can't use information from prior years. So that's what's driving a lot of our California properties to having a no site visit reserve study in those in-between years. So in California, required for the every third year with site visit reserve study, you need to file that disclosure. You're supposed to file that disclosure every year. And here in California, we have what was called the balcony bill from a few years ago, elevated exterior elements. I'm going to get the civil code wrong, but that's every 9 years. That was wisely timed. So every third with site visit, you're including fresh information about your exterior wood assets that are above, that bear humans, and they're above 6 feet from the ground. So anything you could fall and get really hurt.
Yeah.
So those are some of the requirements out there in California. And again, I'm a reserve study guy. I'm not an attorney. So I always have to say, consult your attorney for what the law says. Don't say I learned it on Google. I asked ChatGPT or I had some heard some guy on a free webinar on December 10th. Ask your attorney.
That's pretty funny. Awesome. Thank you, Robert. I think the final question, that we can end is, I think this question is really great. How can we pitch a reserve study and maybe reserve funding to our homeowners? And we obviously have some, self-managed HOAs. There are actually a lot of them in California. So I think it's important to emphasize a reserve study and reserve funding to all of our homeowners. So we would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Well, it actually came from a question I think you asked just a few moments ago. Uh, I'm getting all the questions mixed up now, but the appreciation that the board members have a responsibility to set the budget. It's a team effort. The board set the budget and the homeowners pay. Board sets the budget and the homeowners pay. That's the concept of community association living. There are very few associations where the homeowners have veto power over the budget. And so, yes, you want to be kind, you want to be transparent, you want to be clear on what the budget is. You want to have a nice stable budget so you're not surprising them with special assessments. No one likes that. But you need to make it clear that the bad guy here is Mother Nature and Father Time. It's not us, not the board. If you want to blame someone, blame the weather, blame the sun. That's who's responsible for the roof deteriorating. It's not us. And we're responsible, we as the board are responsible per the governing documents to fund for the sustainability of the association so our property values don't tank. So we don't become like that barn in a slide I showed just a few minutes ago. So be
Right.
kind, be transparent, but it's not like you really need their approval. My kids are all grown now. Um, when they were young, they would say, "Why do we have to? Why do we have to eat our vegetables?" And I say, "It's my job as a parent to teach you the right ways to eat, the right way to live, and to give you a balanced diet along the way."
Mhm.
So kids may want ice cream, but no, they're having their spaghetti and meatballs and salad first.
That's such a great example. Wow. Robert, thank you so much for this thorough and very insightful presentation. I'm pretty sure it was really helpful to all of our board members, and thank you to all of our board members for joining us today, on this Wednesday afternoon for the webinar. Robert, before we end, do you have like a one final piece of wisdom that you could share with all of our board members today?
I want to thank them for attending today. I want to thank those for who are going to watch the recording, but you do need to understand that as a board member, you need to care, you need to be curious. What are we up against? You need to be courageous, and you need to communicate well. And part of that is learning, what does my association need? Uh, find out, you care enough to learn what it needs. You are curious enough to get your reserve site and find out what that ongoing cost of deterioration is. You are courageous and you set the budget and you communicate it effectively to the homeowners. But those four C's are a lot about the life of being a board member right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert.
Simon, thank you so much. Good luck to
Thank
you.
you so much. Have a good night, everyone. Bye bye.